Thank you. It was just 5 years ago that we honored Anthony Shadid, who had just won his second Pulitzer Prize for his extraordinary coverage of the human condition of those trapped in perils of war in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in the Palestinian territories. Following a moving video that featured Tony Shalhoub, Anthony took the stage. It was quite remarkable because he was such a gentle and humble man. I think what impressed us most was his quietness. The story was never about Anthony. It was always about the people that he was covering. 2 months ago, we lost Anthony. He died covering the violence in Syria, telling us a story that only he could tell in the way that he would tell it. Tonight we ask you to join us in a very special tribute to Anthony Shadid. We're joined by Anthony's mother and father, Rhonda and Charles. They're here tonight. His wife, Nada Bekri, herself an accomplished journalist, formerly with the Washington Post and now with the New York Times. And Anthony's children, Layla, who wants to be a writer like her dad, and Malik. Other members of the family and friends are here as well. And we want to begin this with a rather special little video that was put together by Marc Murphy from the Green Bay Packers. He's president of the Green Bay Packers. Anthony was a writer, loved his craft, but he loved his football. And Marc Murphy knew that, and here's a video tribute to Anthony Shadid from the president of the Packers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marc Murphy, president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers. On behalf of the Packers, I'd like to thank the Arab American Institute for asking us to participate tonight. We're honored to help recognize and remember the excellent work and inspiring life of Anthony Shadid. First off, though, we offer our condolences to his family on his passing, his wife Nada, daughter Layla, and son Malik. The tributes to Anthony over the past few months have been very moving. His family lost a loving husband, father, and son. His profession lost an excellent reporter and advocate. And the Packers lost a great fan. Packers are fortunate to have the most passionate fans in the NFL. Many of our fans go to great lengths to follow and support the team. Most of those fans can't touch Anthony, though. Many of you probably know this. Anthony's following of the Packers began while he was working for the Associated Press in Milwaukee in the early 1990s. That's when he became hooked. It is remarkable how Anthony was able to follow the team during his assignments overseas, often under extreme conditions. During our recent Super Bowl season of 2010, Anthony recounted in an article some of those moments. Some exciting, some painful. A true behavior of a Packers fan. From Afghanistan to Egypt, to Lebanon, to Libya, to Iraq, and all points in between, Anthony followed the team, all while reporting on important international events. He used satellite phones and the internet to listen to the radio and TV broadcast. He followed games while in a sleeping bag next to a wood stove in Afghanistan, and also from a hotel room in Egypt, paying for the room simply to watch the game. Some of our fans have to travel to a sports bar to watch a game. To Anthony, that would have been a luxury. We admire his passion. We thank him for his support. He was the epitome of a Packers fan. Thank you again to the Arab American Institute for inviting us to be a part of this honor. And a final salute to Anthony Shadid, a Packers fan like no other.
Well, he was a fan like no other, but he was also a journalist like no other. What made Anthony different was that, unlike many of his contemporaries, the story didn't begin when Anthony got the job. He knew the story he covered was bigger than he was, and his dispatches reflected that historian's appreciation for context and a recognition of the humanity of the people whose story he was telling. You could tell, reading Anthony, he cared about the Arab people. He wanted their story to be told. They weren't faceless objects or just the other side of a conflict. They were real people who had voices that needed to be heard, who had stories that needed to be told. He was a bridge to a world that America impacted so greatly, but understood so little. Anthony was the connection for many of us. His voice is one we will sorely miss. We have a video of Anthony, and it's a special one because it puts together the parts of Anthony that I think many of us need to recognize. Anthony, the family man, Anthony, the person who loved his heritage, his ancestry, and was rebuilding his family home, and Anthony, the journalist.
He always had an idea to go back to Marjayoun and look for his ancestors' home, and I think he finally made the trip in January 2006 and looked for the house. And I think it was then when he had this idea of moving to the town for a year and just rebuilding the house.
This whole thing looks like it's a disaster, and then you see this one little glimpse of that iron grate. It's spectacular. I'm sure it's the same one that there 80 years ago. So it kind of depresses you and makes you hopeful at the same time. This is Anthony Shadid reporting for the New York Times.
What makes you keep going back? You were shot in the shoulder in the West Bank in 2002. Why do you keep going back to war zones?
It's kind of pretty much the only thing I know how to do. You know, I've been covering it for 15 years. I think now finally is the moment that we see that is transformative in the Arab world, and it does make you even more, I think, eager in some ways to cover it, to try to bring meaning to it, to witness it, and it matters. I think there are some stories that are worth taking risks for. And it is a little bit of a cliche, but I think there is some meaning to it that, you know, unless you're there covering it, no one is going to know about it. Unless you're there trying to bring meaning to it, to bring a certain depth to it, it won't be done otherwise. I love, you know, these small things that I think are so important.
He was actually involved in the smallest details of the building, from laying tiles on the ground to planting trees in the garden, and every little detail he was involved.
And we're going to redo these stones. We're going to clean them and then re-put the, we can save this marble from the original marble.
Well, this is exactly what I imagined this room looking like.
This can be spectacular, I think, when we renovate.
As the house was getting, you know, finished, he grew more and more fond of the house. He just loved this house so much. It was for him something that he had created, and created from imagination. In his imagination, it was where his family came from, where it all began. I think it must have been the happiest year of his life.
But there's a feeling when I was shot in Ramallah, and this happened in Libya, in Ajdabia, where you fear you're about to die. But it's not, it was never frantic, it was never, you never felt like getting up and trying to run away, save your life. Instead, it's kind of just a weird resignation, just an acceptance. And
maybe what best characterized him is how nice he was. Whoever came knocking on his door, he made time to sit with them, to tell them what they needed to hear, and more importantly, to listen to them.
He was one of the most relentless and tireless reporters I ever worked for. And only after he had listened to hundreds of hours of people talking, after he had filled notebooks with things he had seen and smelled and heard, did he actually sit down to write.
His extra rare talent was to bring to people in a very poetic way what was happening in these areas. He wanted to be where the bombs were falling, where the human cost was being felt, and he wanted to report that and tell people the cost of war.
I think the world has lost an incredible communicator of this complicated and turbulent Arab world.
Universally respected.
Probably the best reporter of his generation in the Arab world.
Anthony Shadid was a giant.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
well, I think peace in the Middle East is coming. I have to say, I'm optimistic. The moment when the Arab world is remaking itself, is refashioning itself, in some ways is being reborn. Keeping people at the center of the story is the most important thing. Understanding the humanity of these stories is the most important thing. And I think it's incumbent upon us as journalists and as reporters is to keep the humanity there, to keep the meaning of what's actually happening so that we keep the people who read us engaged.
Thank you. I have two quick announcements. One is, as you leave this evening, you'll receive a copy of Anthony's new book, House of Stone. It is compliments of Saad Hariri, who donated the books to all those who attend the event tonight. And I want to thank Amal Mudallali for making this happen. And secondly, as I bring Nada Bakri up here, I want to tell you that we, the Institute and the family, have combined to create the Anthony Shadid Award for Excellence in Journalism. It'll be presented to any journalist whose coverage of the Arab world, the Arab American community, and/or issues pertinent to both, and has a long-standing impact, and whose coverage over the last year has been groundbreaking. The first award date will be next year's Gibran Gala, and we're so thankful to have the opportunity to do that. I want to ask Nada Bakri to come on stage right now.
I really just want to thank everyone for being here and for this great tribute for Anthony. It really means a lot to us, to me, and to Anthony's family. It's really an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
And just a very special thanks to Rebecca Abu Shadid, who helped arrange much of this, and to Deborah Ackel, whose incredible work in putting the video together moved us all. Thank you very much.